Hi there. Welcome to MiWeek. I'm Christy McDonald. We are so glad that you're with us tonight. There are so many headlines this week surrounding Flint and its former emergency manager. So what we really want to do tonight is put all of this in context. We may seem like a broken record talking about what is happening in Flint, but it goes beyond what is happening in a city that you may not live in. The response the state is giving, the consequence for leadership, the precedent for changing infrastructure is something we all need to be concerned about. So let's get you caught up. This week, the EPA and the state of Michigan got raked over the coals during congressional hearings in Washington. Some lawmakers calling it criminal that the EPA didn't share with the public that they knew lead levels were elevated in Flint's water supply. The FBI is now investigating what happened with the water contamination. We'll see how this fits in with the AG's investigation and a separate state task force investigation as well. Flint's Mayor Karen Weaver announced a plan to push removal of lead service lines to the highest risk homes. State's not on board with that yet. And it all comes down to money. This week, outgoing Congresswoman Candice Miller says $1 billion should come to Flint from an EPA fund, and she's going to work to make that happen. There is a lot to get to. Let's bring in our MiWeek contributors, Nolan Finley of the Detroit News, Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. There is no end to twists and turns to this story this week. Did you guys watch the congressional hearing yesterday on Wednesday?
Yeah, bits and pieces, and it was like every other congressional hearing you see. It has very little point other than for the Congress people to, inflate themselves and to look like the public watchdogs. We learned nothing new from that except what we already knew. This was a failure of government at every level. So we know that. There's plenty of blame to go around. Why aren't we now pulling together with some sort of unified strategic plan to fix this? As far as I know, the Michigan congressional delegation as a unit has not yet sat down with the governor to say, look, what are you doing? Here's what we can do. Everybody take a piece of this assignment and let's get this done as quickly and efficiently as we can, instead of sitting back calculating, oh gosh, how can we get the most credit? How can we get the most time in front of the camera? I mean, Brenda Lawrence is running herself silly, trying to elbow onto the stage to get some sort of spotlight here, and it's not even her district.
This is interesting, the political optics of it all, but I want to ask you, Stephen, do you think the congressional hearings were a waste of time? I think it did come down a little bit, parting lines. You heard a lot of Republicans were really going after the EPA, and then you heard some of the Democrats were really going after the state problems as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, as someone who has sat through more congressional hearings than I
You'll never get that time back, will you?
Recount, most of them are a pretty big waste of time. It is about politics. The hearings up on the Hill, they're about politics. They aren't about policy. That gets done on the floor and in bills and things like that. At the same time, I thought it was very interesting to hear both the folks from EPA and the folks from DEQ really explain their side of this in long form, and to hear how each of them took jabs at the other. But you could see sort of the process of all of this and how it sort of just broke down again at every level, that the EPA was not on the ball here any more than the DEQ was. So I think it was worth for us here in Michigan being able to see that. I'm not sure that we've seen that kind of, or that the public has seen that kind of long form explanation of actually what happened here before. So.
All right, but let's talk a little bit about then funding. And you're talking, Nolan, at the federal level, and that there needs to be more of a concerted effort between the delegation here in Michigan. So you do have the two senators from our state, and also along with Dan Kildee, Congressman Dan Kildee, who are saying, look, we want to get this $300 million project through an energy bill. But then you have Candice Miller coming out of left field saying $1 billion from an EPA fund. How does that all translate here?
Well, I mean, it all comes back to the same thing I was talking about. What we need to do first is figure out what we need. And you've got a lot of people running around saying, gosh, we got to replace all the lead pipes. You got the Virginia Tech professor, who's sort of the only hero, or one of the two heroes in this situation, saying we may not need to do that. That may not be the quickest, safest way to fix this problem. Let's figure out the best fix, and not the best political fix, the one that looks the best on TV. Let's take the emotion out of it. Got to figure out where those pipes are, whether they need to be replaced or simply coated, how much money it's going to take. We don't know any of that because our political leaders have been too busy now scrambling and scurrying all over each other and not sitting down together and figuring out what we need.
Yeah, but I don't think people trust the fact that they're going to say, well, we're going to figure out what the best fix is here, and we're going to take our time figuring out, or we're going to study what the best thing is, and then we're going to eventually. My fear is that a year from now, we're going to sit back and you're going to get the studies back in, and you're saying, well, we should have dug up the pipes all along and replaced them anyway.
There's no reason that it should take a year. I mean, there's science here, but Candice Miller asked for $1 billion out of this fund. What does she intend to do with that $1 billion? And, you know,
apparently it doesn't cost $1 billion just to replace the pipes either. I mean, the numbers I saw were in the millions, not the billions for that. So
SPACs are grandstanding.
You do have to, again, you have to sort of segregate some of these things into short-term and long-term priorities. Short-term, the priority is making sure that the drinking water in Flint gets back to safe levels,
level.
right? You should be able to drink it, you should be able to bathe in it. There shouldn't be any problem with that. That's absurd. It's absurd that it ever happened. It's absurd that it's gone on as long as it has. Whatever that fix needs to be, they need to figure that out. And we still have real problems with that because the pipes have not recoded quickly, and that could take some time. So is there something else we can do in the meantime to make sure that the people of Flint have what they need? At the same time, the long-term question about replacing pipes, service lines, lead service lines in people's houses, you can't confine that just to Flint. I mean, the biggest mistake we would make would be to do that in Flint and not address it everywhere else. I mean, again, this is a long-term, big picture issue about infrastructure and cities that we need to talk about in bigger context.
And so you had then Mayor Karen Weaver, who came out this week saying, well, I want to move forward with replacing lead service lines. And then you have Lansing Mayor Verge Bernero, who's like, well, we know how to do that, and we can help you, and we can come in and jump on this. So this lends to everything that we've just been talking about for the last 5 minutes of who is going to lead this, who is eventually going to say, okay, Mayor Weaver, okay, hang on. Where's the leadership here?
It's the governor.
Can the governor play that role anymore, though, because of where this is?
I don't know if he can or not.
Sure he can, because I think he's got the resources and he's got the control over the levers that have to be moved here. He's not certainly being helped by the constant politicizing of this. That certainly weakens
some
his
of it
ability.
in his own office.
Some of it in his own office, sure. But I think that not only limits his ability or his effectiveness, but it also, I mean, everywhere you go. I was out of town last week. Oh gosh, can you drink your water up in Michigan? I mean, this is at risk of really tarnishing Michigan's image, Michigan's reputation, and hurting the state.
Go ahead.
So this is a governor who has shown absolutely no interest over 6 years in dealing with these problems in any bigger sense than the EM law. He has said consistently since he has been governor that the EM law and some of the other little nickel and dime tools that they have are fine enough to get cities back on their feet. And the truth is that's just, I mean, it's absurd. It's never been true, and now it's embarrassingly untrue. And this is somebody who's got to pivot and say, you know what? We've got to start talking about how we fund cities, how we make sure they have the resources they need to keep people safe, to keep the lights on, all those other things. And we're going to talk about infrastructure. He said in his State of the State that he wanted to deal with infrastructure because that's what's lurking behind this problem. We've yet to hear any detail about where he wants to get the money from, where he wants to put a plan together. None of it. This is not his thing, and he's going to have to change a lot about who he is as governor to deal with it, if he's going to deal with it at all.
I was going to say, well, we're not even hearing the kind of specific details coming out of Flint, and I want to get to a little bit of this.
That's not true. I mean, he's put together a plan, and he'll have a budget. He'll have a budget on Wednesday that should spell this out. And you know, you said he hasn't done anything for cities. I would argue this
that's
governor.
not what I said. I said he has consistently said that the EM law is the only tool he needs to deal with the problems that cities have, and that's just not true.
Well, it certainly worked in Detroit.
But that was a bankruptcy. What worked in Detroit was a bankruptcy and $800 million from outside.
You could not have done that without the emergency managers. You could not have done that without Kevin Orr.
No other city got that.
All right, but I want to go back to the larger question of you have the congressional delegation. Now you have Lieutenant Governor who says this is the most important work of his life, that he's going to be spending a lot of time in Flint.
Certainly of his political career.
Well, see, now this is what I want to get to. You have the Congresswoman Candice Miller, who could be possibly eyeing a run for governor. You have Attorney General Bill Schuette, who has launched his own investigation. Well, now the FBI is in on that. Does the FBI trump a state investigation into what's going on in the Flint system? And you have Dan Kildee, who could possibly be eyeing a run here. So what I'm saying is you have these a little bit political forces. Why are you laughing at me?
Well, no, I'm laughing
and
at
I
the
want to be able to put
situation.
this in context about how people are coming in to help, but then where is the leadership that is going to be able to bind this all together?
I mean, none of the people who are not the governor can do this. I mean, they can all talk about it, and they can, they can be part of the solution. It's got to come from the governor. The governor has got to take the reins here in a way he has not shown a proclivity to do. And he's got to say, this is my problem. I'm going to solve it not just in the short term, but in the long term, and not just in the small context of Flint, but in the big context of what goes on in cities in this state.
And that's where I think Wednesday's budget presentation will be a clue to what he plans. But you have a whole lot of people out there more interested in helping themselves than helping the people of Flint. You had Debbie Stabenow kind of pushing her way onto the stage at that Rachel Maddow town hall, claiming she's been leading on this from the beginning. That's the first time she'd shown up. You know, you see a crisis and politicians see an opportunity. And until they are willing to subvert their own interests to doing what's needed for Flint, I don't think we're going to make much progress here.
Well, if they can make some noise in Washington and bring home some federal money for Flint, then I think that'll be helpful.